link.
It's
Maybe
like
I need to,
6 nay and 3 yay.
Public comments again. Oh, yes.
okay, let me,
525.
Hey, Travis, can you promote Sonoma TV to a co-host?
yeah, I'm looking at this email, Travis, and I don't see any link.
Yeah, if you're looking at the most recent one, it's not there. You need to look at the one beforehand. He didn't put the link in the second one at 524.
Okay, and what time was that? Did that come in?
Let's go back here.
Matt, I didn't have an attachment either from the recent one from Travis.
Yeah,
So are we going to be starting soon here?
Yeah, right. Yeah, there were no attachments. It's a folder. I'll send it right now again.
It was yesterday.
oh, I see it here. I had filed it in a folder, yeah.
I had yesterday's.
Oh, I see it. Okay, here it is. Yeah.
So yeah, the point of that was just to update everyone that more public comments had been uploaded. They were sent either to me directly or to the public comment email. So yeah. Wendy, do I also record this, or is that it's all covered?
Yeah, you'll want to record it in the Zoom.
Okay.
We'll be ready to start in just a minute, Chair Hollaback.
Mm-hmm.
I got to make sure the box cast is working.
Well, I'd like to convene. I'd like to convene. Um, am I getting feedback?
Yeah, everyone who's not talking, let's just mute ourselves.
Okay, I'd like to convene and call this meeting of the Community Services and Environment Commission to order. I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Richard Weiss to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Unmute, Richard.
Okay. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
To
to the flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it
stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Richard. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Alabak,
Present.
Commissioner Blattner,
Present.
Commissioner Donnelly,
Present.
Commissioner Metzler. Commissioner Metzler. Oh, you're muted.
Here.
Good, gotcha. Commissioner Morrell
Here.
and Commissioner Weiss.
here.
Great.
Okay, well, I'd like to explain our public comment process with the virtual CSEC meetings. We appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate this new normal. Some meetings have been Zoom bombed. In the event of trouble, we'll stop the video immediately. If we can start again, we will. If not able, the meeting will end and all unfinished business will be postponed to a later date. Each meeting of the CSEC and staff members will be participating in the meeting from their home or office. They all have families, pets, or roommates. In order to be respectful of their private spaces, commission members may turn off their video, but they are still listening and participating. If a commission member leaves the meeting, they will let the chair or city sustainability coordinator know, and that will be noted. Public comment for the meeting will be handled as follows. Zoom. Instructions for participating via Zoom are provided on the agenda under public participation instructions, and the link can be found at www.sonomacity.org. If a member of the public would like to speak, click on the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. This will notify city staff that you would like to speak. City staff will then unmute your microphone when it's your turn to provide public comment. A prompt will appear to confirm you would like to be unmuted. Once you accept the prompt, you will be able to make your public comment. Zoom meeting using a regular phone. Call into meeting and dial *9. This will notify city staff that you have raised your hand for public comment. City staff will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to provide public comment. You will hear "you are unmuted," then you can make your public comment. Excuse me. Email. Public comment will be accepted via email to publiccomment@sonomacity.org. Public comment can be submitted at any time. However, in order to be read into the record during the meeting, it must be submitted after the chair calls the meeting to order and prior to the close of the public comment period for that agenda item. It will be read into the record with a maximum allowance of 3 minutes per individual comment, subject to the chair's discretion. Please include the item number that is being referenced in the subject line. Only one email per item can be submitted by each member of the public. Now we'll move to approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda or modify the agenda? Commissioner Blattner, you had something?
I had a question about agenda item 3.2. Was there, when we were discussing about the plaza, was there going to be an addition about discussing the dog policy? It wasn't there.
I believe that's under item F, 3.2F.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Good? Okay. So can I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
This is a motion to approve the
agenda,
agenda. Sorry, Chair Alabak,
Yes.
Commissioner Blattner,
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Metzler,
Aye.
Commissioner Morrell,
Aye.
Commissioner Weiss.
Aye.
The agenda is approved unanimously.
Thank you, Travis. Now we'll move to agenda item 1, comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It's recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the Community Service and Environment Commission at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for CSEC consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the chair, please step to the microphone or the new podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name. Are there any public comments for items that are not on the agenda?
No, Chair Alabak, there's not.
Thank you. We'll give a couple seconds maybe if anyone wants to weigh in. And now I'd like to ask advice of staff. With the consent calendar, do I just ask for a motion to approve the whole consent calendar all at once? Travis?
Yes, unless someone
Okay,
wants to pull something, but
Okay.
yes, otherwise it's all one package.
okay. Well, unless anyone from the commission, and then I also have to ask if anyone from the public would like to do that as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, so would anyone like from the commission like to pull anything from the consent calendar? Would anyone from the public like to pull an item from the consent calendar?
No one's raising their hand, Chair Alabak.
May I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Chair Alabak,
Yes.
Commissioner Blattner,
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly,
Yes.
Commissioner Metzler,
Yes.
Commissioner Morrell,
Aye.
Commissioner Weiss.
Aye.
The motion to approve the consent calendar is passed unanimously 6-0.
Thank you, Travis. Now we'll move to agenda item 3, regular calendar, matters requiring discussion and/or action by the CSEC. Item 3.1, update from CSEC representatives to the Joint Standing Climate Action Subcommittee. David, would you like to give us a short update?
I would be pleased to give an update of the meeting that the JCAS had earlier today. We had a lively meeting. We covered a number of topics. The main focus is on the increasingly amended City of Sonoma Climate Action Plan, which was in the agenda showing the changes made to the previous plan and its current status. There was some extensive discussion about further changes that would be recommended by the 4 members of the JCAS to the Climate Action Plan, and those were discussed rather vigorously by the group. It was especially urged by some members of the committee, both council and commission, that urgency be added to the action items, that it be not a business as usual process, but a much more urgent process reflecting the climate emergency that's been adopted by the city. There was also strong suggestion that items that the council of the city has approved some years ago be addressed in the plan, either as to their effective implementation, their partial implementation, or their non-implementation. And if appropriate, they could be proposed for removal formally so that we know what's happened to them. I would say in conclusion that we agreed to provide written comments to staff, Travis Wagner, over the next few weeks. with a 2-month deadline to come back with an energized, action-oriented city climate action plan. One last comment, and I suspect my colleague, Mr. Fred, may want to comment further. There was an extended discussion of the impact, significance, and power of equity in all actions relating to climate, and a lack of particular clarity as to what that meant and how equity would be addressed in the climate action plan.
Thank you, David. I'll also add that there was some guidance for Travis to prioritize the climate actions that had the greatest greenhouse gas reduction payday, and also balance that with the actual cost feasibility of those things for the city. And so that Councilmember Felder suggested that Travis develop 2 lists, and then the council could look at both of those and kind of decide, how to get the most payday for the least amount of money, or what things would cost. And that will conclude our update from the Joint Standing Climate Action Subcommittee. Do I go to public comment for this one item, Travis?
I mean, it is an agenda item, so
Okay.
yes.
Well, any comments from the public on this item?
I see David Storer's hand is risen. It's been a long day. Risen, up.
He's in the public.
I'll stand up, Mr. Morrell, if that helps you feel better. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to what was presented from the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee committee, from a staff lens, there was also discussion about the role for Travis in the next few months relative to his role staffing the CSEC and also staffing the joint with respect to putting the bang for the buck in those items that will be coming forward with respect to the actual plan itself. Primarily, the concern that I have as director, that we have a very skilled person on our hands that can focus our city on focusing to those specific actions in the climate action plan. And over the last few months, I've noticed a trend to him performing more of an administrative role than that of an expert in helping us reduce our impacts as a community. And so that's my lens from what was discussed, and that'll be something I'll be talking with the city manager about. And I believe that was something that was agreed upon, not necessarily agreed upon, there was no formal action, but I believe you Chair Alabak and Mr. Morrell, we're all in favor of that, of utilizing Travis in the best place possible. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you, Director Storer.
And there are no other comments from the general public, Chair Oliver.
Thank you, Wendy. So we'll move to agenda item 3.2, discuss and consider A, the role and responsibilities of the CSEC regarding the climate action plan, B, Plaza Park special event permit process, C, the proposed restructure of the tree committee, D, improvements such as bike racks in and around the Plaza Park, E, future meeting schedule for the CSEC, and F, policies for the Plaza, discussion and recommendation. Do we have staff? City Manager Toy?
Yes, hi, members of the commission. I'll do the brief staff report. So as you may recall, you had a joint meeting with the council on January 12th, where we talked about a series of issues, talking about the current future role and responsibilities of the CSEC with regard to a variety of issues. But basically, at the conclusion of that joint meeting, the council requested the CSEC really meet separately at this meeting tonight to kind of talk about these items in more greater detail and make recommendations to council as you see appropriate regarding these items. So my suggestion this evening is, as you stated, Chair Alabak, there's the 6 items, or what the role responsibility CSEC regarding the climate action plan, Plaza Park special event permit, proposed restructure retreat committee, improvements such as bike racks, future meeting schedule, policies for the Plaza Park. And so what I thought maybe a recommended approach is if you took each part separately, I could just do a brief staff report on that one item. You could ask any questions, maybe take some public comment on that item, then have a discussion, and then move on to the next item. It's just because I'm thinking if I run through everything and you talk about everything, take public comment at the end, there's kind of so many things, so I'll get mixed up, and maybe it focuses your discussion where if you just take them one at a time.
Very good. So should we start then with, so City Manager Toy, will we make, is this anything we'll make a motion on, or is this stuff that we will just
No,
comment?
Oh yeah, it was just my recommendation. If the commission's not opposed to that, then yes, we would go ahead. We'd start with the climate action plan, make some brief comments, we could ask questions, take some public comment, and then talk about it. And then if you have a recommendation, then obviously staff record it, and that'd be something we take forward to the council.
But we won't make a motion, it'll just be a recommendation.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the end you might make a motion, but if you wanted to just to officially say that's your recommendation. But at this point, to move forward, for example, so the climate action plan, you recall at the joint meeting, we talked about the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee, and we discussed that really the joint JCAS should really be the committee responsible for the climate action plan, recommendations regarding such things like the city sustainability and climate action work plan. But at the joint meeting, there was a suggestion related to should we expand the membership of the JCAS or create a new climate action committee? So I think at this point, the policy issue is that something the CSEC is interested in recommending to the council, either expanding the membership of the JCAS or creating a new climate action committee that in essence would assume the role of the JCAS. And if you believe you'd like to expand or create a new committee, then really how many members, should those members represent certain interests or categories like youth? And so anything related to that. So that's pretty much the staff report for this item.
David.
Well, let me kick it off. I've been with the Climate Action Committee from its inception, or when Mayor Harvey was still involved a long time ago in that sense. So I've watched the evolution. I have a couple of thoughts I wanted to start the conversation with. First of all, I do think it requires at least one more member to the joint committee, either from this CSEC or probably not from the council, or you'd have a quorum issue, or from the general public one way or another. When you have only 4 members of an operating committee, it's a little unclear what's a quorum, who's the chair, how do you vote with a 4-member group. It would seem to me to be better to have 5 or 7 as members of the Joint Climate Action Committee. Second, I would want whatever decision we make about the committee size, structure, and independence or link to the CSEC, that it recognize the urgency of the problem, that the climate emergency is with us, it's real, and it cuts across everything one does. It's ever present. So this becomes a very important matter, I believe, for the city of Sonoma decision-making, both this body and the city council, to deal with this aggressively and effectively. So I would start with that. I may have more to say later.
Thank you, David. Matt.
Yeah, I have a comment, and I'm going to be pretty blunt here, but I just have to say, that I think that the question of the future of the city's climate actions presents us with quite a dilemma. In my opinion, so far, I think many of the council's climate actions have basically amounted to on a sinking ship. I think this is because the public is in denial about the seriousness of the problem, which presents council members with a difficult choice: either enact unpopular policies which may make re-election difficult, or continue with the current ineffective half measures. And the best example I can make of this is in the area of transportation. This is the economic sector in which we have made the least progress in reducing greenhouse gas production. As shown on page 13 of the city's draft climate action plan that was presented at the meeting this afternoon, despite reductions in other areas, our transportation impacts actually continue to increase. It's obvious that this is because we Americans are addicted to driving gas-powered personal automobiles. And so I think no amount of increasing EV charging stations or encouraging bicycling and public transit will break this addiction. What is really needed is for Sonoma to become a regional leader in implementing aggressive actions to disincentivize driving single occupancy personal automobiles. And one of the most effective ways to do this would be to stop providing free parking around the plaza. However, I think this would be unpopular with the voters, and therefore council members would be reluctant to implement charging for parking. Unless council members are willing to undertake aggressive actions such as this, regardless of the effect of their chances of being reelected, questions about the makeup of the Climate Action Committee are moot. That's my opinion. I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission thinks.
Thank you, Matt. Any other commissioner comments? Kimberly?
Well, I agree with exactly what Matt said. And as we all know, that in terms of political science and electoral politics, it's always about exactly that, not making changes because wanting to be reelected. So it seemed to me the issue is to find out who doesn't care about having a second term and finding out if they are pro climate change and they don't want to run again, and see if we can get them on that joint committee.
John?
Yes, I guess I have a couple of points here. I follow up on what David said and at our December meeting, we spoke about broadening the network of the Joint Climate Action Committee, broadening the outreach to the community. And if transportation is the main lacking sector, if we're going to increase the size of the Climate Action Committee, I think we should be more strategic and see if we can get stakeholders that are in that particular transportation sector. And I think that I also, as far as the priority and the importance of the Climate Action Committee, I think it should be separated from the CSEC. I think that it needs to have that standalone high profile in the community and with the expansion of it. And I think that the CSEC then would be left with looking at what it's in its original charter, which was parks, recreational facilities, open space, and natural environment, which seems to include trees, which we'll talk about the tree committee. But there's nothing in that chapter 2.48 that mentions or is updated for climate issues as far as environment is concerned. So I think we have an opportunity here to strengthen the climate action arm of the city by strengthening the Climate Action Committee and broadening its space more strategically.
Richard?
I'd like to second what John is saying. All of our other responsibilities are not existential in potential repercussions, unlike climate. And there's a certain diminution of importance by having it subsumed under our aegis. So I think if Matt, whose principles and values I second, will ever make any progress in this, it's going to have to be a committee that stands alone and has real serious advocates, not distracted by parks and dog poop.
David, you have something to add?
Yes, I certainly do. I liked a lot of what Matt said until the end about the fact that the committee would be moot. Getting rid of the committee would make it even worse as a symbol of what we're doing in the way of a climate emergency. So I think the committee has some real relevance. I like a lot of what I'm hearing from John and Richard about the potential for an independent committee if it has the strength to really act. I would urge that the CSEC, in its continuing review of Plaza events, continue to press for VMT concerns, on which this committee has not had enormous success to date, despite some of us pressing rather hard on this topic. It is a climate-related issue, but it links back to regular CSEC responsibilities. So there will still be climate issues of one kind or another germane to the CSEC, even if a climate action group is totally separate from CSEC itself. We have a city that has adopted, I believe correctly, a climate emergency resolution. That should drive the actions and the characteristics of the Joint Committee.
Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what David said and point out that that is the special events, something that we will discover in the special events policy, which is, what letter is this? The next item B. But I also just want to point out in our charter, it says in consideration of the natural environment. Well, the climate is like the most important aspect of the natural environment that we are dealing with. So I think that definitely falls underneath our purview in our charter, dealing with climate change. Although I'm not necessarily, my previous comments, I'm not necessarily saying that advocating disbanding the committee, but I do think that climate change is under the purview of the commission.
Well, if I might have a few comments here, I think that I'm in strong favor of a standalone committee. And one particular reason is that Travis has been hired as the sustainability coordinator, not as staff for the CSEC to administer for the CSEC, which has all sorts of other things that are not in particular sustainability. So if we were to advise and pull for a standalone climate committee, then that might possibly free Travis's time up to more good effect for his expertise to be solely focused on that, or mostly focused on that. So I would like to strongly recommend for a standalone committee. And I'd also like to suggest that committee be enlarged. I looked at Petaluma and Sebastopol. Petaluma has 9 members with 2 youth. Sebastopol has 10 with a youth, business, environmental justice, rights of nature, someone with a climate background, and someone outside the city. Now, the more people you get, the more you would be bogged down with, people all having to say things. But I think that it's really worthwhile to have a broad perspective on a potential standalone climate committee, particularly with youth and someone with a climate background. I know there's a number of people here in town who would probably be perfect for that, someone from outside the city. So I would suggest that there would be a cross-section of valley sectors, and I like John's suggestion of someone with a transportation background in particular, so that this potential new standalone climate committee would have a one city council, one CSEC, one youth, one Latinx, one outside the city, one business owner, one environmental justice equity background, and one climate background. I realize that that could get a little messy, but I think it's really worth it to have more voices and to have a broader net. But we also want to balance that with Travis being somebody who would be able to guide us to getting the good programs and major reductions that we could get. I like pretty much everything that people said. I like the paid parking, focus on transportation, urgency. I I liked a lot what John and Richard said. So City Manager Toy, are you hearing some common themes here?
So yes, although I would suggest maybe you might want to take public comment on just what you talked about, if that's okay, and then we can come back.
Sure. Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to make public comment on this item?
Chair Alabac, I see no hands being raised.
Matt?
Yeah, so I just a couple of details here. I like the idea of a standalone committee. Under Travis, and I am suggesting we think about making a motion, but I just wanted to talk with everybody about the details. One of the things I think that we should be recommending would be that the Climate Action Committee would be under Travis, the sustainability coordinator, but then we would be asking the city council to assign a different staff member to be the staff for the CSEC. And I don't know if we have, if that's a reasonable recommendation to make. So, and I just have other questions about the process. Can we establish a new committee, or would that require rewriting the city, the municipal code, just like the other commissions are all laid out under, the city codes. And I'm wondering how that would go, how creating a new committee would work in terms of the city law. So maybe I can get a comment from the city manager or from Travis about what the process would be.
So if I may answer your question, the council can create a new committee, whatever you want to call it, Climate Action Committee. They can just create it by resolution. It doesn't have to actually be in the municipal code by ordinance. So they can do that in the resolution. They can lay out the membership. In terms of staffing, that's more of our administrative side, but obviously with the Climate Action Committee, that would be Travis. We'd have to figure out for CSEC or have Travis work more hours if he was available for the CSEC, but we could figure that out administratively. Really, it sounds like, to me, the majority of the CSEC is saying we like to recommend a standalone committee. Not clear to me how many people, unless you're going with what Chair Alabak said in terms of the categories and the number. So that's the part I think we would need a little clarification on, is how many members and what categories, or if what Chair Alabak said works, then that's pretty clear.
I can recap what I said, and if anyone feels like it would be a good idea to cut some out, I said one each of City Council, CSEC, Transportation Expert, Youth, Latinx, Outside City Resident, Business Owner, Environmental Justice, Equity Background, and Climate Background. So that would be 10.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I just recommend, I think that that it works best if it's always an odd number. Therefore, you avoid tie votes. And I think it's great having all of those other groups represented. However, if we recommend a resolution that requires all of those members meeting all those criteria, I think it would just get too complicated. I think we should think about saying something where trying to include members of these different groups, but if we have like each position is designated for Latinx, outside the city, transportation expert, whatever, it just would be the selection process would be just get too difficult.
So can I make a suggestion? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please do.
So maybe to make it a little simpler, and I think Commissioner Metzler makes a good point, is maybe go with 7, of which you're saying 1 council member, 1 CSC member, each body would appoint somebody. And then the other 5 would represent a combination, ideally, of what you talked about, like transportation, youth, because someone could actually represent 2 or 3 of these categories in a perfect world. And that maybe you also build an at large, because you may find that someone might be great for the committee, but they don't really meet any of these categories per se. And so you have more flexibility, but the thought pattern is you really would like the council to put together people that, in essence, they are very passionate about the topic, have a certain level of expertise is possible, and that it's a high priority to have this committee work on the climate action plan and its implementation. At least that would be my recommendation.
Sounds reasonable to me. I'd like to just add on with the at-large person. I used to choose trail crew members, and I had like maybe 30 applications, and it turned out that the people with no experience ended up being better than the Eagle Scouts. It was the beginner's mind and the having the right attitude that really made people good.
So, Mr. Chair, if maybe it'd be good for someone to make a motion that you'd like to recommend to the council. I assume I'm not sure of the title, a climate action committee. If that works, that seems to be the typical title a lot of cities use for this type of committee. And that your motion would be, you'd recommend the council form a separate committee called the Climate Action Committee, and have 1 council member, 1 CSC, and then those categories that we just talked about with at large, and that pretty much the council would ask for applications and then appoint people.
We just take your what you said as the motion?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Okay. Do I hear any objections or anything to add, Matt?
I think we need to clarify a little bit. Could you just, I just like to make sure we're all clear about what these other groups that we want to have represented. Can you go over that again, Fred, what you said?
1 city council, 1 each city council, CSEC, transportation experts, youth, Latinx, outside city, business owner, environmental justice, equity, climate background, and that's it. And environmental justice equity had a forward slash in between. So as I was looking at that, I had prioritized transportation expert, youth, and climate background in addition to city council and CSEC, which would make 5. And then maybe as city manager Troy suggested, some of the others could be combos to add up to possibly 7 or stay with 5.
That sounds good.
John? Muted.
You're muted, John.
I'm sorry. I'd like to ask Travis to give us his thoughts on what we're proposing here in terms of the composition of a expanded climate action committee.
Yeah, I think it seems reasonable. But I would also say on some level, you don't want to recruit for specific areas because there's always that can potentially exclude others that might actually have some really good background and benefits. But I think expressing that as a desire to fill those particular positions is good.
Yeah, I key off of that because I think we would start off with David's point that there's a lot of public denial that it's like, don't look up if you've seen the movie. And if we limit ourselves just to some specific experts on this climate action committee, I think we're missing an opportunity to reach out and start to broaden the understanding of what we're up against in terms of this urgency for climate action. So maybe we can find some way. I think I said this in the January or the December meeting that we need to find some specific climate action measures and really start to act on them and publicize them. So we broaden the network and the information and get people talking about these and buying into it.
Yeah. Well, John, I can leap right onto that. And that was the whole point over the last year or more of trying to get some information from Plaza event attendees about how they got there. Obviously, I wasn't building scientific data. My PhD involved scientific data. This involved getting people to think about the issue, to raise the visibility of the issue. And so where you're going with this, I think, is right on point. I would urge that this committee have as much power as it can to make a difference in terms of climate and make the city of Sonoma a leader in climate, along with the new county office called CARD and RCPA and other cities. This is going to very quickly become an issue of what does it mean to be a tourist-oriented economy with sensitivity to vehicle miles traveled. So there are tremendously interesting issues that can mobilize a lot of very interested citizens in this town if we do it right.
I'm wondering if we need to get a little bit more staff input, or maybe have a staff report, because I want to. What I really like what Fred said, that sometimes, you know, someone from with the least experience, or who's kind of outside, that doesn't fit the mold or outside the box, is sometimes the most valuable. And if we lay out these criteria, I'm afraid that someone will think, well, I'm not going to apply because I'm not a transportation expert, or I'm not a youth, or I'm not Latinx, or I don't, you know, fit one of these criteria. And I'm wondering if we can work out all of these details in a resolution here tonight. I'm just afraid of passing a motion that will kind of box us in without having really thought through all of the details, that it's hard to get it worked out in a committee like this.
I think the city manager proposed a way to finesse that by having one CSEC, one city council member, and then look for, you know, maybe 5 people who might combine some of those characteristics, so that it wasn't like you had to be X.
Yes.
And so I think that the city manager finessed that already.
Okay. Yeah.
Kimberly?
Or we could certainly prioritize what expertise we absolutely want to have, and then say, like, have 3 select around particular, say it's transportation, environment, and then have 3 open positions with no requirements.
People feel okay about recruiting for a climate person specifically? So do people feel comfortable with where we are? Do we have a recommendation here?
I'm curious. I'm not clear on who is doing the choosing, irrespective of categories.
So typically how it would work is, obviously the CSEC, you could recommend who you'd like to be on it. Ultimately, the council would. They would choose. And the easiest thing for them is, normally what we do, you put out an application, you maybe have some boxes to say your area of expertise, you can check as many as they like, and then the council would pick 5 people that hopefully would have some of these backgrounds, some may not, but hopefully and then that would form the 7 members of the Climate Action Committee.
I see the results really being governed by the application process. We're looking for people with interest in and potentially experience in climate issues, although it's not necessary, it's not required, because I agree with the city manager that in a premeditated way, blocking ourselves in to being restricted to certain kinds of people will discourage potential applicants who might have a lot to add.
One thing for youth member might be like when I was a youth and we had to do nuclear duck and cover drills in grammar school. I didn't know about nuclear policy, but I could get on a commission and say, look, I'm tired of having to run under the desk thinking that the whole world is going to end. And, you know, when Gorbachev came up with Glasnost, it was just such a big sigh of relief that, you know, but, you know, now it's back. But so I think that, you know, people who have had this permeate their experience through, you know, growing up with, you know, doom and gloom, their voice could be very powerful without being an expert on anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what puts the wind in the sails, is people who have some real feeling.
So I guess I'd like to make a motion, but first I just want to clarify, we're talking about disbanding the existing joint climate action subcommittee. Is that correct? So anyway, my motion is that we recommend to the city council that they create a climate action committee with 7 members, 1 city council member, 1 CSEC members, and 5 others that represent the following groups: transportation experts, youth, Latinx, outside the residents of outside the city limits, members of the local business community, and environmental and justice advocates. So that's my motion.
I second it.
I'm hearing that that's too specific. I like the general theme, but restricting those categories is going to give us a problem. I think if I would amend the motion, recommend we amend a seconded motion with respect to preference given, or the community at large be encouraged to apply with an interest in this field with their credentials in one or more of the following categories emphasized in their letter of application to the council. Something along those lines would be my friendly amendment to an excellent proposal.
Yeah, I agree. I was trying to think of the way to say it, that, you know, with people among the following characteristics, not limited to.
Exactly. Yes. And in their letter of application, they're referencing their interest and their skills in one or more of the following areas.
Exactly.
You okay to second that, Kimberly?
Yes, much better.
Okay, well, it looks like we are arriving at a roll call vote.
Before I guess we have to discuss. Yeah, I would like this new committee to have specific authorities. I'm thinking more on the lines of the Planning Commission as opposed to the CSEC, so that we're recognizing the urgency of Don't Look Up style movie, that climate is a big deal. We're going to be different. We're going to really take some action, and that this new group has some authority to do things, not just to talk.
Well, David, you're right at the top here. We can ask what City Manager Toy thinks of that.
Yeah, I'm looking at his Hollywood Square.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't have any issues of passing that recommendation along to the council. Obviously, then you get into what exactly is that authority. Typically, most things come back to the council.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're recommending, maybe if I take my experience with another climate action committee, is maybe if they have some budget authority for some things, then that gives them a little more flexibility over how to do some things. But why don't we have that discussion at the council? Because I think that's something they'll have to some noodle, but we can pass that recommendation.
I'm pleased to leave that in your qualified hands with the guidance I just tried to give.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Before we do that, I need to actually kind of parse out what the language of the motion, because it's a little unclear. So, and everyone has to know what they're voting on. Since this was David Morell's motion, could you repeat that?
It was Matt Metzler, seconded by Kimberly Blattner, with a friendly amendment from David Morell.
Okay, and so yours is the last one, David, which is under Rosenberg's. That's the one we vote on. So if you could just state it slowly and clearly, so I can write it down, so I can repeat it, that would be great.
Matt, did you have anything written? I'm just making it up.
I can just have some notes here. So what the motion would be is we move that the city council disband the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee and create a new Climate Action Committee under the staff of the Sustainability Coordinator that includes one city council member, one CSEC member, and then here's where I need you to say what it was you were going to say, David.
Okay, and 5 members of the city, 5 residents of the city who bring a range of skills and appropriate interests, including environmental action, climate action, transportation, local economy, youth, equity, Latinx, and seniors. What the hell? I can't be against seniors. How does that work?
I wanted to suggest one slight change. Instead of saying 5 members, 5 residents of the city, instead of saying 5 residents of the city, say, and 5 other members, at least 4 of whom are residents of the city.
Perfect. Yes.
Representing the following.
Yeah, general areas of expertise and interest.
And concern.
Mm-hmm. Travis, is that close to something that can be a real proposal now? This is
yes.
It's all easier when I'm typing than it is talking.
I have most of it down. I would just ask your permission that at some point I get to review the recording, because it's got a very long motion, just to make sure I have all the language, but I think I have it all.
So granted from my
Okay.
point of view.
And if everything's okay with that, I can go ahead and do a roll call vote. Are we good to do that?
I think so.
Okay. So Chair Alabak.
Aye.
Commissioner Blattner.
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly.
Yes.
Commissioner Metzler.
Yes.
Commissioner Morell.
Aye.
Commissioner Weiss.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously, 6-0.
Okay. That was some friendly sausage making. Now we'll move on to agenda item 3.2B, Plaza Park Special Event Permit Process. City Manager?
Yes. So what I thought would be helpful on this item is Lisa still here. So I thought it'd be helpful. Lisa Jansen could describe what the city goes through internally, administratively to approve or to review actually special event permits. And then when she's done, then I could share with you what our recommendation would be and what the council direction was to the CSEC. Then you could have a discussion, public comment, and then decide what you'd like to do.
Lisa? Are you there?
So first off, I apologize. I just tried to start my video, and are you seeing me at all? Because it's showing that it's still blocked. Oh, wait a second. Let's see if I got it to work. Come on. I'm getting a virtual background is still loading. Can you see me at all?
No.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start, and if it might turn on at some point, which would be lovely. But good evening, Commissioners and Chair Albach. The primary purpose of the special events policy, which was included in your staff report on this item, is to set the rules and processes that will guide the Community Service Environment Commission and the Special Events Manager in seeking an appropriate balance between the benefits of organized events and their associated impacts on the community. This policy outlines the community benefits of special events and community costs of special events. It defines the types of special events and how we define the scale of each event, if it's large or small. Depending on the scale of the event, we then follow a different process in approving the application. I think it's really important to note that the policy outlines the application process from the start to completion, including the post-event review process. In making a determination about the approval or conditions of a special event permit, the CSEC or the Special Events Manager shall consider and make findings regarding the following factors. Does the application conform to all the general and site-specific restrictions, requirements, and guidelines as set forth in this policy and in the appendices hereto? In the case of recurring events, which most of our events here at the city are, it outlines, did the event previously adhere to all the general and site-specific restrictions, requirements, and guidelines, and just any specific conditions of approval as indicated in the post-event reports prepared by staff and in the post-event reviews conducted by the CSEC. What are the nature and magnitude of the community benefits that are anticipated for this event and the reoccurring events? What was the magnitude of the community benefit, including the value of the donations to nonprofit beneficiaries realized by prior events? And then what are the nature and magnitude of the community costs and impacts that are anticipated for this event and for reoccurring events? What was the magnitude of community costs and impacts that were experienced in prior events? So as we start the process, we always start by the qualification is this a small scale event or is this a large scale event? Our small scale events are those that can occur within an 8-hour window. They typically will only utilize one section of the plaza or of Depot Park. And large scale events are really classified as anything that takes longer than 8 hours from setup to the time that they're pulling out of the plaza and leaving the premises. And large scale events also typically are more than 2 sections of the plaza. So once we make that kind of determination, city staff will then decide, okay, does this event, if it's a small scale event, is there anything unusual with this event? And so typically what I will do is I will kind of highlight or pull out any issues that I see with a small scale event and take it to what we called the SEC. The SEC is the Special Events Committee. It's comprised of city staff. Typically it has the city fire marshal, a police sergeant, sometimes the chief of police, city park supervisor, city street supervisor, myself, and then sometimes I will bring in the CHP if it warrants it, and code enforcement. Those meetings are typically in person. We typically have the special events manager on site, and they will typically bring one or more of their team members to those meetings for these very in-depth, detailed discussions. What typically comes out of those discussions is the list of conditions. Those conditions are then, as we call them, the conditions of approval. Those are the same conditions as if you looked at the consent calendar this evening for the Motives Half Marathon. You'll see that there's a long list of conditions that the event organizer needs to meet in order to have a successful event. So at a certain point, back in, I think it was 2018, we made some modifications. So we used to take every event, large scale event would go from the staff review to the SEC review, and then to the CSEC with a formal report, agenda item, supporting documents, and then we would meet and you would review it and either approve it or deny it based on the criteria outlined in the special events policy. Back in 2018, we made an amendment to that into the application process, and we started what we call a good standing event. Good standing events are any large scale event that occurs over a 2-year period with no issues or items that of discrepancy. So, for example, if we showed up on site and there was cars parked on the plaza on the grass, that would immediately warrant that event is in no longer good standing. If they didn't hire the trash sorter and recycling company, that would then make that event not in good standing. Again, at this point, we have kind of 2 criteria. We have those events that are in good standing, those that are not. And really, at this time, it's not that we don't have they're not in good standing. It just means that there have been some small issues that we're still trying to address. So with that said, just quickly, hold on, let me just pull up my notes. We have approved in 2021, 7 events that are large scale events, 3 of which were in good standing, and the other 4 came to you for review. These numbers are down significantly from 2019. You have to remember 2020, we had 0 events. 2021 events came back in June. And so the numbers are definitely down. In 2019, there was a total of 26 small scale events and 14 large scale events, as compared to 2021 when we only had 15 small scale events and 7 large scale events on the plaza. Of the 2021, like I said, of the 2021 large scale events, 3 are in good standings and didn't require going to CSEC approval. I am working on a post-event review document that I will be putting in front of the CSEC in March. I will be sending out, I'm going to try to make or create, using our Proud City website, online form to gather your feedback on those events. So I'll be sending out that link utilizing Proud City to you probably within the next week. And I'll be looking for any input or items you would like to see added to the post-event review in a formal way. Let's see, I'm trying to think, what else? I think it's also important to know that, if you look at our special events policy, we have a lot of items on the special events policy. Those rules and restrictions are costing our event organizers, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I just want everyone to be aware that in 2022, our small scale event fee is going up from $237 up to $631, and large scale is going up from $1,051 to $1,500. And it's really due to the amount of staff time it takes to be on site and manage all of the rules and restrictions that we now have. A lot of them are linked to our special events or the waste minimization, and ensuring that not only the event organizer but their vendors on site are actively participating. And so we did kind of relax the rule in 2021 on the single-use plastics, but we will be bringing it back with additional enforcement in 2022. And I will note also that Travis Wagner will be updating our special event policy to include the city's implementation of SB 1383 and our serviceware ordinance that has recently passed. So we will be making some additional changes, and I think it's just important to know that typically how those changes are made to the special events policy, it's almost a 9-month process from start to finish. So it isn't as simple as just taking everyone's feedback. We try to get the event organizers involved. We try to get their feedback as well. There's a series of public discussions and meetings that we have, and then I'll bring recommendations back to you and input, and then ultimately you would make recommendations to City Council on how and what you'd like to see included in the policy. Any questions?
Don't all raise your hands at once. Well, Lisa, I'll say something. I'm satisfied with how the special events policy is as it stands, and how the protocols for events in good standing. And I think you've really done a great job, and you're a trustworthy, really good person on the job. And my concern is what would happen in the city if you were to leave. That's when we would need to have a solid special events policy, so that that would stand in good stead for all of the the issues and items that we've hammered out over the years. So as far as from where I stand, I like the arrangement as it is, and have stuff be on the consent calendar for items in good standing. And I think you have good judgment on how to handle events, and you're appropriately forgiving and not too strict, and you balance costs and benefits of the community well. I think that it's good for the CSEC to have eyeballs on the special events policy, and have a place for the commission to review if need be, if they fall out of good standing. So that's basically how I feel about special events policy, and I look forward to making comments on new policy. And I heard you say that you thought there was a lot of rules and that was adding to the cost, but it seems like the waste minimization rules are ones that we want. Were you saying that maybe that the CSEC had added egregious rules that were adding to the cost of events besides the plastics reduction and waste minimization?
No, Fred. What I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of rules that we need to follow. Our policy is really extensive in its current format. But with that said, to implement on that policy and do enforcement on that policy, it takes a lot of staff time. And so that staff time then gets passed along to our nonprofits, of which, almost all of the events, except for the one that was on the consent calendar tonight, those costs get forwarded over to our nonprofits, who honestly use these events as an opportunity to message out to their community. They use it as fundraising opportunities and to celebrate their heritage. And so I do see at a certain point, events might become really cost prohibitive.
So we should have a cap on the rules.
I'm not, that's up for you to decide. But just realize every rule, it's additional enforcement.
John.
Yeah, I think we were asked if we had any recommendations for amendments or modifications to the current special events policy. I think we've talked about this in terms of the Climate Action Committee. On page 83 of the packet, which is the city's special events policy, it goes through purpose, but then it goes into benefits and costs. And on the cost, it has impacting the environment due to generation of excessive trash and single-use plastic. I think maybe the new Climate Action Committee might want to modify that and add something like impacting the city's ability to meet its climate action goals, especially due to the carbon footprint of transportation to the event. I know that would be a huge staff cost to try and do that, but I think it's in line with what we've been discussing in terms of the urgency of the climate measures.
Matt?
Yeah, so I agree, and I wanted to follow up on something that Commissioner Morrell has brought up in the past. Considering the Sonoma economy is tourism dependent, and considering that tourism is transportation dependent, and considering that transportation is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Sonoma, and considering that transportation is the one sector in which we've had the least success in reducing those emissions, I think the special events policy needs to be amended to include something about gathering information about where and how far from and by what methods people transported themselves to special events in Sonoma. Now, I think that we need to have some discussion. My idea that I had brought up in the past was having volunteers I've been to events like this where you're hanging out there, whatever. Somebody comes up with a clipboard and say, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" They just check off 5 things. Where'd you come from? How far did you come? Did you fly, drive, bicycle, whatever? And then you give them, they get a ticket, and everybody who answers the questionnaire gets a ticket. Those get thrown in and they have a drawing or something like that with some little prize or something. However, I'm realizing now that things that I've done in the past, all of this could be handled electronically by an app. Everybody's got a phone. If there was something where you could have try and encourage people, of course, not required. We will never get anywhere close to, we will never get any close to 100%, 50%. It would probably be only a small percentage of the attendees of the event who would complete this, but it could be done through electronic means with an app or something where we could gather that data. And it would only take people 1 or 2 minutes on their phone to just pull up something and fill it out. And then everybody who completes it could be eligible for some type of incentive or door prize or something. And if it's all done electronically, then they don't have to be present to win. Anyway, I don't know how, I've just seen things like that at other events, and I'm wondering how that could all be, there's a lot of details there to work up. But I do think that because of the transportation, the greenhouse gases produced by people coming to Sonoma, especially by people flying long distances, that we need to have some way to gather that data, knowing that the data is not going to be by any means complete, but it's just going to give us a snapshot of some information about how much greenhouse gases are being generated by special events.
David?
Well, Lisa wouldn't be surprised to hear me jump in on this topic, thanks to John and Matt. I was being careful not to ride this hobby horse again. I think it's great. I would simply add, Matt, that we're also, by doing something of this kind, whether it's a clipboard or an app, is we're getting people thinking about the climate issue. The more people think about it, the more they look up, they may see the damn thing coming at them, to steal from the movie. So I'm in line, of course, with getting this. What I really wanted to do is to thank Lisa for your enforcement activities that you described before. I'm really pleased to hear that. And this is a prelude to what I'm going to have to say about my canine friends later this evening.
Richard, do you have any comments?
I have to say, Lisa, I'm really impressed. The alignment of values that the process expresses is impressive. And I think we're all very pleased and proud that we're associated with you and what you've done with this aspect of Sonoma events. I also agree with Fred that I would encourage you not to leave town.
Kimberly?
Same. A lot of us here have worked with Lisa for a long time here, and we know her work ethic and how hard she's worked. And when we talk about getting things done efficiently, she's the model for that. So Lisa, I thought it was a really complete report and on board with it.
I had a thought about the accounting for special events, transportation impacts, is that in the recent past, the Norman Krug Hotel project on Verano Avenue did an accounting of the transportation of the people who would come and stay at the Krug Hotel, which is Best Western, and they sort of did concentric circles and had a general picture that the bulk of people were coming from the Bay Area region to come into Sonoma. And so I think that it would be possible for the city to look at certain special events and do kind of a concentric circle analysis of generally how far people are coming. And then it's possible that the Chamber, the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau, and the Tourism Improvement District could buy carbon offsets for that. So there might be a way to finesse this so that you got not a tremendously granular picture of who's coming, but you could look at the way that Norman Krug did the analysis of who's coming to visit his hotel and recap that for various special events that many of them are clearly mostly local, and then come up with a figure of what the metric tons of carbon would be for that, and maybe it's possible that the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber would consider buying offsets for that, so that Sonoma would be a leader in that way. I don't know if that's buying offsets really does anything, but at least it shows that people care.
I just like to point out that before we can even consider doing something like, that's a great idea, Fred, buying offsets, we need data, and we have zero data right now. So there has to be some way, no matter how incomplete or inaccurate it is, we need to begin having some way of getting data on where people are coming from to Sonoma.
Maybe we could cut some rules out of the special events policy to make room for the new rules. I don't know which ones could be cut out. But,
I could.
Mr. Elleback, would you like to go out for public comment on this item?
I think so. I think that's a good cue to open this to public comment.
So that said, I see no one raising their hand. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for bringing us back from aimless blather, or myself. Sorry, I won't tar everyone else with that comment. So Lisa, do you have anything to say about what people have brought up here? City Manager?
I'm going to turn it over to Garrett.
Okay.
Okay. So I think what we heard, I think from a staff perspective, I understand the climate and trying to track the information on greenhouse gases. I think we don't think it's a good idea to impose that on the nonprofit. So I didn't get that this commission was thinking that. However, I think it is interesting, as Commissioner Meltzer mentioned, that could be something the Climate Action Committee comes up with in terms of how to track and finding volunteers. Like, I think I've seen some places there could be a QR code on a board. Someone does it, turns it on, takes them to survey, they fill out, boom, they're done. So I think those kind of ideas we could work with the Climate Action Committee. That would fall into the realm if they actually had a budget, then they could, have someone create the QR code, put it on and go from there. So I think those are things we could pass on to the council as an idea that's important for climate action, but not a requirement for the actual nonprofit. But otherwise, it sounds like the CSEC's recommendation is keep everything the way the process is as now. You're comfortable with that. You think that works well. Lisa does a great job. And it seems like that's it. But you'd like us to explore the climate action part of tracking information. And we could ask the Climate Action Committee, if the council agrees to form one, that should be a task that they should think about.
You happy with that, David?
Yes, it's been 2 years in the gestation, but we are making significant rapid progress.
Well, if David's happy, I'm happy. Matt?
I do think, though, that it doesn't have to be at all onerous. It can be very simple, just like one sentence in the special events policy is that this gathering of data about where people come from will be occurring at the event. And we could even throw in language like, and it will have no financial impact upon the nonprofits who are running the events. But I do think it should be stated in writing in the policy that there will be some type of gathering of data going on at the event. And it could be like Mr. Toy says, just a QR code that's posted to various places around the plaza, and a simple statement saying, or something printed in the program where they're saying, oh, and when you get a chance, scan the QR code and complete the survey, whatever. But I think if we don't put it in the policy, then it would be overlooked. But it doesn't have to cost the people running the event anything other than maybe printing one line, putting up a couple posters and printing one line in a program or something like that.
So can I offer a suggestion to what you just said?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if we did add something, I'm thinking maybe it'd be something more along the lines of, to the organizers, the city reserves the right to be able to collect information on, however we want to phrase it, greenhouse gases, transfer. We may conduct surveys, and we'll coordinate with the nonprofit, so that's allowed. So it's more like they're permitting us to do something, and if we can put something in their materials, we'll try.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we could come up with something. I think along those lines.
I like what you said about having it be a QR code. I just know I've been to events where there's been some kind of electronic data gathering. I don't even know how it works, but yeah, something simple. You just do it. That's why I don't remember. It's so easy. It's like I've done it on my phone and I even forgot about how it worked. But
I guess the take-home point is that the commission would just like to have this advice be heard by the council, and it's certainly up to the council to decide what they would like to do, but we'd like to get this to them. So is that good, City Manager Toy? Can I move on to the next item?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. This will be agenda item 3.2C, the proposed restructure of the tree committee. City Manager Toy.
Yes, as you may recall, during the joint meeting, we talked about the tree committee. Currently, the tree committee consists of 2 members of the CSEC and a certified arborist. The tree committee reviews development applications, makes recommendations to the Planning Commission or DRHPC as needed, also reviews proposals for tree removals by homeowners. In the staff report, we talked about the number of meetings needed. I think we said fiscal year 21-22, there are about 6 meetings, depending on the meeting, 1 to 6 applications. We did add in 2021, the calendar year, there were the tree committee reviewed 4 arborist reports, 35 homeowner tree removal applications, and met 6 times. One thing I think David Starr did report at the joint meeting was that under SB 330, jurisdictions can only conduct up to 5 public hearings related to approval of a housing development project, which means if the tree committee did have to consider something related to a development application, that would count as a meeting because they're reviewing it to make recommendations to the Planning Commission or DRHPC. So we talked about at that meeting the concept of the tree committee's responsibilities moving in-house, where staff will be working with a certified arborist. We could come up with noticing, tying ribbons around trees and so on, so that the public would have ample notice before a homeowner would be able to take down a tree. But really, at the end of the meeting, we said, well, let the CSEC talk about it more. And really 2 policy questions. One, should the tree committee be restructured according to make it become administrative, function in-house, working with arborists? Or if not, what recommendations could the CSEC propose while considering limitations on staff? Because right now it takes a lot of staff to staff the tree committee, and the limitations on public meetings under SB 330. So for example, it could be development applications wouldn't go to the tree committee, but all homeowner applications would still go to the tree committee. So it'd be things like that, something to take into consideration staff time as well as impacts on SB 330.
John.
Yeah, Kimberly and I serve on the tree committee for the commission, and I'd like to ask Wendy and the manager, what is the staff time involved for the tree committee? It seems to me my experience is that you receive applications, they're scanned into the system and sent to us, and then we meet with the arborist and the city planner associate to go over those. So what staff time would be saved by taking the 2 commission members off the tree committee? And then all along that, if you go to a different model, what would be the increase in staff time if you tie ribbons around the trees and have public input coming into the staff, or if it's appeal to the council, there's going to be additional staff time. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what the savings of the staff time is going to be.
I think Wendy could probably, since she staffs the tree committee, maybe can comment on that portion. I can comment on the noticing part.
I would say on average, it takes about 2 hours to prepare an agenda for the tree committee, and then staff time to participate in the meeting. And then another 3 hours to write the approval letters.
Wendy, how would that be different if the you still have to write an approval letter even if you meet just with the arborist, and the staff time to prepare the agendas pretty much, isn't it, copying the applications?
Yes, and combining them into a PDF and organizing it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what the staff time would be if we reviewed them administratively, because I don't know what that would consist of.
Mm-hmm.
Matt?
Yeah, so I am a little bit confused. It seems to me like there's almost like two separate processes. One is for existing homeowners in an existing property that want to take down a tree. And it seems to me it's like really different when it's development. In other words, when they're rebuild, a major remodel or new home development or whatever, that seems to be a lot different than just an existing home where they're doing nothing other than minor landscaping and taking out a tree. And it seems like in the former case, when it's a development, can't the tree issue be addressed when other issues are addressed with approving the development? In other words, aren't there drainage, landscaping, septic, all these other issues that are addressed? And wouldn't the tree also, the trees that would have to be, that they're considering being removed, be considered as part of that process? Why does that have to be a separate meeting for a separate hearing for the development process?
So if I can, so you're correct. I think what we're recommending is, rather than development applications being reviewed by the tree committee, because that counts as a meeting, it would just be the arborist report would just be reviewed by the planning commission or DRHPC. They would just include all those approvals or denials all within their development application.
Yeah.
So all it does is theoretically, it saves one meeting out of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly?
Yeah, I had expressed this before. I think I've been on the tree committee for probably 6 or 8 years. And I think in that whole period of time, the 2 commissioners who had been on the tree committee either didn't know what they were doing with regards to trees or just loved them and were there, but always kind of went with the arborist. So I was starting to feel like maybe we were a bit redundant, and we were on the tree committee simply because we loved it, and we loved to go out and analyze the trees and listen to the people and get that kind of thing. But when I was listening to Wendy, I thought, well, anything that they could possibly do to reduce their staff time made sense. So I'm not sure exactly where that opinion really goes, except that I'm not sure how valuable we have really been outside of the expertise of the arborists. And the arborists, we've really just never really had any disagreements about where to go. The big issue would be then you'd have to make sure that you always had an arborist who was sound and trained and knew exactly what to do, so he wouldn't be making false or faulty decisions, he or she.
Matt, do you have your hand up, or is that still up from before?
Sorry.
David, do you have any comments?
Oh, this is an area where I'm going to defer to my esteemed colleagues. The whole issue of urban forestry is of increasing significance from the point of view of climate, of course, which gets us back to the other issue and water retention along the stream. So at the Ecology Center, we spend a lot of time on these issues.
Richard?
I agree with David. I was on a similar committee in Vermont, and as Kimberly mentioned, the arborist knows everything, and all you can do is listen and nod and say, yes, thank you for that. It's very pretty.
I have a couple thoughts. I'm curious, after all these years, why staff time would be an issue now than it maybe wasn't before. I think the SB 330 limit on public meetings is a compelling idea, and but I also like maintaining the tree committee for homeowner applications. And I see that trees are number 6 in the CSEC purpose. And there's also probably crossover with climate aspects of tree canopy, urban forest, that these things would be good to keep CSEC members on. And, I admire my CSEC colleagues, and I think that with Kimberly and John, you have 2 of the top seasoned city volunteers on the tree committee now. So I would want to see people of that quality stay on in some capacity and something that they enjoy doing. So I guess
I think, Fred, it's really just a question of what then are really the responsibilities of the tree committee members, because we don't make overall policy decisions about tree forest plantation or anything like that. It's basically just a homeowner deciding whether or not they want to remove a tree. And that's pretty much 99% of what we do. And we generally go with the arborist decision. I mean, it'd be great if we actually had some real policy input and could actually do something broader, but that's not where we are right now. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, I am concerned about making the staff time efficient as possible, of course, but I'm also reluctant to give up some citizen oversight, and the fact that with some marginal citizen participation on these decisions, that we learn and become more informed about how these decisions are made, and in turn can become advocates for the city's tree policy, which is to enhance its tree canopy and protect it. And it shades into the climate measure as well. So just since I've only been on this barely a year, but I've already been involved quite a bit with this Sonoma Ecology Center Earthlings program that is really on a big project to start planting trees through the city, and I'm encouraged them to come and speak to the tree committee. I think I saved the staff some time just last week when one of the applicants who was denied, a good friend of his, called me and asked what could they do, and I said, well, in fact, I checked with Wendy, and never in 16 years, she said, has there been an appeal to the council. But I was able to, from my already moving down the learning curve of the tree committee, advise them to go out and get an arborist and get another opinion. And so I think that, and they called and thanked me and accepted me. The arborist did confirm John Messevier, our arborist's opinion. So I think there's a role still for some citizen participation, both for oversight as well as advocacy. And so I just balance that against how much staff time is saved by taking the citizens off this committee.
I'd like to second that, what John just said, and I think that the CSEC, with the various opportunities that has, particularly the tree committee, it gives citizens multiple opportunities to serve and be involved in the life of the community. And I think that's really important, and I think that part of the purpose of local government is to serve the community, and this is a really good way. And I don't know, I just admire John a lot, and I say that he's the Secretary of State of the Sonoma Overlook Trail. So if you have somebody of that caliber on the tree committee, that's worth having, and that's just an illustration that he was able to, not have an appeal come through. So there's very skilled people there on the tree committee. So I would like to see them stay in the capacity that wouldn't have an SB 330 impact.
Yeah, well, I just want to add to that because I actually agree with John. I'm just, what I'm really saying is it's a question of balancing how much time the city thinks they have to do to have he and I on that committee, because it's one of my actual favorite things to do, to go out and analyze the trees and determine, you know, what is the big issue about why they have to come down or why they have to stay up, all those kinds of issues. So it really is an issue, I think, for the city to say, you know, are they short-staffed? What's the big issue about continuing with us?
Fred, oh, sorry, Chair Alabak, pardon me. Would you like to go out for public comment on this item?
Thank you, Wendy. Yes. Will there be any public comments?
I don't see any hands being raised, Chair. Thank you.
City Manager Toy?
So it seems, so I think from the staff time, I think it's hard for me to say how busy staff was obviously years ago, but I think lately staff's been pretty busy. If you think about all the different committees that we staff, I think that was just one suggestion on the tree committee. However, it sounds like the CSEC, you're thinking you'd be okay if we took away development application reviews and just kept that with the Planning Commission and DRHPC, whichever body is considering whatever the application is. And that for now, keep the tree committee for homeowner applications. And then what we could do is maybe we could keep better track of the staff time it takes. And then next time we have a discussion, say a year from now, we'll have a little better data and we can go from there. Does that seem reasonable to CSEC?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that recommendation to the council. I guess normally we would ask for a motion, but I think in this case it's pretty clear, so that's okay. We just move on to the next item if that works for you.
I think so. So let's move on to agenda item 3.1D, improvements such as bike racks in and around the Plaza Park. City Manager Toy.
So at your joint meeting, we raised the issue of adding bike racks in and around the park. At the meeting, it was pointed out to us that there was a plan for bike racks, at least in the Plaza Park, and so that's actually attached to the staff report. And so really something we wanted to talk to CSCC about is, did you want to make any modifications to that plans attached? And do you want to explore bike racks in areas outside of the Plaza Park, like maybe in a parking space or something like that? And actually, I'm thinking if that's something that you're thinking you'd like to explore, then maybe it's not something we recommend to the council this time, so much as maybe at the next CSEC meeting, we start talking about it more in greater detail about what you're thinking, what could possibly work, and then we can think about whatever the public input process into that, including the chamber and visitors bureau related to that, if you actually want to explore bike racks actually outside of the Plaza Park. Again, the current plan for the Plaza Park bike racks, is that still good, or do you want to take another look at that in terms of the locations in the plan? But that's pretty much the staff report, and it's off. The item is also open to if you'd like to talk about any other improvements for the Plaza Park.
Matt.
So the staff report didn't reflect what happened, I think, in 2017 or 2018, when we went through all this, and it was a plan was put together. This preceded Mr. Toy and Mr. Wagner's time with the city, but there was a plan that went to the city council. The city council turned it down. But I think what the best thing, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, would be to review the plan that was already put together by city staff back then, because I had extensive meetings with with Fergie and the public works director that preceded Fergie about this. And the city council rejected the plan on a close vote because there was objection to the Public Works recommendation that the bike racks be installed on a cement pad. And the city council objected to paving over more of the plaza. I did not agree with the Public Works Director's recommendation that the bike rack had to be placed on a paved cement pad. I think the bike racks will be fine on grass or on gravel or wood chips. So I think I would like to recommend that we have staff go back to the plan that was presented to the city council back then and change it and have it installed, have the bike racks installed because they had a location for them and everything, and have them installed, but have them put on grass or gravel or wood chips.
So to clarify, I think that's what we attached to the staff report to CSEC. The staff report from January 29, 2018 to the city council, and attached is the bike parking. And I agree, it doesn't need to be on a concrete pad.
I see. I don't see that. I see all of this. What page was that in the staff report?
Oh, I have it as page 106. Well, page 103 out of 120 of the packet.
Okay, still.
Although it is a pretty thick packet.
Yeah, page 103. Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I'd just like to approve this with having it be on gravel or wood chips or grass instead of on a paved cement pad. Because I believe this plan was thoroughly vetted at the time.
I'd like to add to that plan the bike rack shape that's in the shape of a bicycle. That, you know, people have talked about how they can't figure out that the sculpture is a bike rack, and there was in the staff report certain things that should be avoided. And I think that if people see a green bike rack, that's a pretty clear indicator of where to lock your bike.
I wanted to say that I have discussed this with on more than one occasion with Eris Weaver, the director of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, and we see in the staff report rack styles, the racks to avoid, and the rack style that the Bicycle Coalition and the experts recommend are the inverted U style. And I think just simply the inverted U, I think they're the cheapest and the least prone to vandalism, or, you know, the least, they're the cheapest and the most durable. The inverted U style, I think, are those are the recommended by the experts as reflected on page 114 of the staff report.
Take back my comment and go with Matt's inverted U.
Matt,
Yeah.
are they less expensive than the multiple racks that are in the shape of spirals, you know, that
If you look on the staff report on page 118, those are specifically listed under racks to avoid. The multiple bike, the racks where you can put multiple bikes on, like the wave style. I got a document from the Bicycle Coalition listing all the styles, and they had all the pictures where those kind of racks ended up being problematic because people put the bikes fell over. Anyway, they had lots of pictures they created just basically a lot of bicycle clutter and bikes all parked, all cattywampus, and just
to look it up, because they were the ones that I used to be on the bicycle committee for the city of Toronto, and they were very popular and cost efficient. It was a number of years ago, but the ones to avoid were the wheel benders, the ones that just supported the wheel and didn't come up to like 30 inches.
The wave style rack has the advantage of you can park multiple bicycles on them, but the inverted U, one of the problems with the wave style rack is you really have to lift your bicycle over the low part of the wave, or similarly through the spiral, you have to fit it through the slot. And some people don't put them in through the slot. Some people lock them parallel to the rack. Some people block them perpendicular to the rack. And then you get a whole mixture of bikes. It's all confusing. Whereas the inverted U style, basically, there's only one way to lock a bike to it, and there's no confusion. And
okay,
I don't
spend this commission's time designing, the actual thing. I don't know if that's part of our mandate, but I was curious to know why that was not recommended.
I would just add that believe it or not, it's 15 years ago, we did the trailhead improvement project at the Sonoma Overlook Trail, and we installed 4 inverted U bike racks there on the grass, and it's been very successful. We've never had any issues with it, and no bikes stolen, etc. So that's a good. I totally agree with what Matt's saying.
Chair Alabak, would you like to go out for public comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Wendy.
Okay.
Is there any public comments?
No, I don't see any hands being raised. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, are we getting clear here, City Manager Toy?
Okay, so go back with the 2018 plan. We're not advocating concrete pads. At least I'm not. I heard that was the issue last time. The issue of exploring any bike racks outside of the Plaza Park, like say some places like where I've been, we did bike corrals and improved racks by the Marin Bicycle Coalition, but it takes parking spaces where you had 1 or 2 parking spaces and you could put, in essence, like 20 bikes. I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm just wondering, is that something you want to explore, or just keep with this plan, worry about something else later?
It would be great if we could expand our territory off of the city park and out into the larger plaza. But I think in the past we've been told that our authority stops at the end of the plaza.
Yeah, I just like this. My sense is that this is what the Community Recreation Task Force is inventorying now, and will make recommendations, including a master plan that will include new expansions of bicycle accommodations. I'd love to see at the plaza what we see in other towns, a rack of electric bikes that can be checked out and used around town and brought back. Be part of our climate action measure.
So I spent a lot of time on this issue back in 2018 or whatever it was. I reached out to a lot of companies. Nobody was willing to. You got to have deep-pocketed corporate sponsors to do a bike share program. And they want to have bike shares in big cities where they're doing bike shares by the hundreds. So we could not get any traction on anybody. If anybody knows, Sonoma Mission Inn or somebody with Sebastiani Winery, somebody, we need a corporate sponsor with real deep pockets to get. So I looked into that a lot back then. The other issue, what we originally advocated, and and really tried to push for was to convert 1 or 2 parking spaces to a bike corral, or the diagonal space that's created by the diagonal parking that you know, there's the curb here and there's the diagonal parking. There's like this triangular space there, and creating that in the bike corral. But that we're running into a whole bunch of other issues that were brought up by Public Works in terms of, well, the street sweeper can't access it, or you have to really install bollards to prevent people from parking their cars there. It just gets into a lot more expense and complications. And that, I would think it would be great to have a couple bike corrals. And the research is very clear that more bike parking generates more customers for local businesses. You know, one car might have 1 or a couple people in it, whereas 1 car parking space that could accommodate 6 to 12 bikes, that's 6 to 12 customers. But the Public Works was very resistant to the extensive, you know, hardscape that would be required to convert some of the parking spaces to a bike corral. So I think that'd be great to consider in the future, but I think we have a plan here. I think we need to approve this plan and get some bike parking in the ground now, and we can consider converting some parking spaces to creating bike corrals at some point in the future.
John, I don't know if you can give us a sneak preview. It seemed like City Manager Troy was asking if we had any ideas outside the plaza. Seems to me that maybe 2 inverted U-shape per quadrant of the plaza would be good for people who wanted to park their bike and maybe go to the boulangerie or wanted to maybe that would work. I don't know, but that wouldn't be the CSEC. That would be Public Works.
I think it's great. I think that really we should have a couple in every block on the sidewalks. A lot of people will be more likely to ride their bike if they can lock it right in front of the Basque, the Murphy's, Sebastiani Theater, all these, the Cheese Factory location, all of these businesses. We need a lot more bike racks. But all of those brought up a whole, when we discussed this before, brought up a whole bunch of issues in terms of ADA, interfering with car parking, businesses, some, you know, businesses objected to having a bunch of bikes parked in front of their business. Yeah, like I say, we went through a lot of this back when it was discussed before. So I think we should consider it in the future, but right now I think we should go with what we have and maybe have a future discussion about the other additional bike racks.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing, Chair Alabak, is 2018 plan, take that back to the council. I'll think about more of the process, because there needs to be a process related to bike racks anywhere else around the plaza. But it sounds like it's something worthwhile considering at some point, but there just needs to be a process. So I think if it's consensus, I'm good with going to the council with a recommendation to implement the 2018 plan. And that assumes no concrete pads.
Okay.
We're copacetic. Well, let's move on to agenda item 3.1E, future meeting schedule for the CSEC.
So I think Travis, that'd probably be his item.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pointing out, so originally, if you look at the attached municipal code, the CSEC is supposed to meet 4 times per year, which is the same as the Joint Climate Action Subcommittee. And one of the issues that's been brought up is as it's increased in its meeting and we've had more commissions and committees, the challenge on staff time, which is focused more on supporting or administrating than doing the actual, some of the items and analysis and so forth. So that's the issue that has come up. On the other hand, we're in part, you're discussing potential changes to the mission and so forth and so on. I think the point is to consider what is a reasonable amount of time so that you're not wasting your time. You're maximizing or, having the most efficient use of staff time, but actually, meeting all your expectations and so forth. So it's just kind of that issue to come up to discuss. Is that something that should be addressed? But it would be a recommendation to the city council, because the city council is charged with modifying that 4 times per year, but it just slowly has morphed into the monthly, and then went back to every other month, and now it seems to be going back to a month. So it would be some sort of consistency so that everyone can plan accordingly. And that's the point of that.
A real live topic here. Well, maybe I'll break the ice here, Travis. The CSEC meetings got staggered to the JCAS, and so then there was half the meetings per year. And now we're looking at maybe creating a whole new climate action committee, which would then take away the rationale for having to split the CSEC, if part of that rationale was that the city would take advantage of you as the sustainability coordinator and not as a CSEC administrator for parks and things that weren't necessarily part of your expertise. So, but then that gets back to that maybe these days staff time is more precious. And so personally, I enjoy meeting once a month and seeing my fellows here and getting to discuss various issues. And I find it pretty rewarding to be involved in the life of the city. There's usually something on the agenda. I don't think I can ever remember a meeting that was less than an hour. So I don't know. I guess I'm feeling nostalgic for monthly meetings, but also want to be sensitive to staff time, because I know that there's a lot of important issues at the city besides some of the things that come to the CSEC that may be more important than that. So I guess there can be more meetings if they're needed, so that 4 times a year for the CSEC seems like that it would adapt to the current needs of the city, and that presumably the city would adapt if there needed to be more CSEC meetings. So I'm willing to go with 4 for now.
Would you like to go up for public comment on that?
Sure, thank you, Wendy. Is there any public comment on the number of CSEC meetings per year?
No, Chair Allenbach, there's not. Thank you.
Guess they're holding their fire.
Yeah, next one will pick up. Do we need a resolution of a motion on this item?
I think, I guess one exception would be, would the CSC be willing to meet next month to receive a report from the Recreation Task Force? It kind of messes up your quarterly whole thing, but.
Me. I've been looking forward to that.
Okay. So you would have a meeting in March, but otherwise you would move to quarterly meetings, at least for now. And you could have special meetings if you need it. Okay.
Sounds good.
So there.
That would be March 9th, according to my calendar then.
Yes. Okay. So I think, yeah, I think it's good. You'll go quarterly, except you're going to meet March 9th. Hear a report from the Recreation Task
Yeah.
Force.
And-
The caveat being, if they're ready, I think they'll be ready to report then. But on the odd chance they can't, then we'll let you know.
If we were to have a motion, mine would say something about quarterly, but also on call for urgent issues, or some such language that would on call by the council or by the chair of the CSEC in coordination with ... some way to make it possible for urgent issues to be more than for a year.
Yeah, I think you could do that anyway. I think we're just saying your
Okay.
regular meeting
Yeah.
would be once a
Got it.
quarter,
Okay,
but you could always have special meetings, and that's usually the chair working with staff.
perfect. Thank you, manager.
Okay,
Okay, you got anything else on your agenda, Fred?
yes, we have one more item. Agenda item 3.1F, policies for the Plaza Park, discussion and recommendation. The manager Toy?
So yes, I agree. This is probably the most controversial item, but you may recall at the joint meeting, we did broach the issue of staff related to the policy of no dogs allowed in the Plaza Park. And the reason we came up with that is the policy in essence, it causes enforcement issues for events. And specifically, the city doesn't have enough resources to enforce it really on an ongoing basis. It's enforcement's unpopular with residents. It's problematic for staff and that interaction that we have with dog owners. We had talked about the joint meeting, the idea of a pilot program that you maybe would consider dogs on a leash, but not allowed in playground areas and not during the farmers market because that's state law. But all that being said, I think we wanted to clarify the staff's not actually seeking any recommendation of whether or not to do that or not. What we're really asking is that something worth exploring, and if it is, what would be the recommended process to get public input? Because we do know a lot of people feel pretty strongly one way or the other when it comes to dogs in the Plaza Park. So pretty much we're just seeking guidance from the CSEC. Is that something you even want to discuss? Is it something even worth discussing or exploring? And if so, what's the public comment process that we would like to undertake?
David?
I would love to start this conversation around the word enforcement. I would remind my colleagues that I spent several years as an official of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, both in Washington, D.C. and in San Francisco. Many of my responsibilities involved enforcement. Without enforcement, we would not have clean air, clean water, hazardous waste control, and the other issues. So the challenge, it seems to me, is to not throw up our hands and say, oh my goodness gracious, Jimmy and Janie don't like enforcement. The challenge is to do enforcement. There are many times when I gave speeches and I would ask a large audience, how many of you ever exceed 65 miles an hour on a freeway? And the hands would go up. I would follow that by saying, and how many of you exceed 65 miles an hour on that same freeway with a CHP trooper in your rear view mirror? No hands went up. And I said, welcome to enforcement. So we need to find a way, in my view, to enforce the current rule, which I prefer to the dogs on a leash rule, but that's neither here nor there. Either one needs enforcement, needs real enforcement. It needs money behind it or volunteers or some way. The signage on the plaza strikes me as really fatuous. It says no horses and no dogs in little white signs with some lettering on it. That's nuts. And so it sends the entire wrong message that we're not enforcing our rules in this city. So I urge the city to find the budget some way or encourage volunteers with clipboards, they can ask about VMT at the same time, to enforce no dogs on the plaza unless and until we change it to a leash rule. That's all I have to say about dogs.
Matt?
Yeah, agree that the current restriction is difficult to enforce. However, I think that this change would be even more difficult to enforce. Telling people, oh, dogs are allowed on a temporary basis, but not at the farmer's market and not in the playground. That I just think that would be even more difficult to enforce than we think we having a problem with enforcement now. We would have an even bigger problem. We'd especially have a problem with a temporary rule that, oh, if we had something temporary, then after 6 months or a year, we rescinded it and went back. Once that horse is out of the barn, it will be hard to get back in. Once this dog is out on the plaza, it's going to be really hard to get it back in. And I just hate to. I feel for dog owners, and it's the same old thing, the one rotten apple rule. And I've had them. I stepped in dog doo in my front yard. And my front yard has very thick bushes and very overgrown, and there's no way I was going to see this dog do. And I just think we would be creating more problems. So I don't think that we even need to take any action. I think we need to leave the policy as it is, because any changes would be even more difficult to enforce than what we already have.
Richard.
I agree with both David and Matt. And further to the discussion, since our last meeting, I've been asking every Sonoman that I meet what his or her opinion is on this issue, since it's been getting a lot of publicity. And I have been impressed. It's not a large sample, it's something under 100, but it's running about 6-1, keeping the rule the same. And in addition to that, I've been impressed with people's sort of generosity of spirit, not leaving it at that, but looking for a potential solution to dog owners' issues so that they can, in fact, enjoy more time with their pets in the city of Sonoma. And almost to the man, they've been struggling with including in whatever resolution or recommendation we come up with, including, in addition to keeping the rule as it stands, as it is, recommending that other alternatives be explored to address the needs of dog owners so that Sonoma can be viewed as a more dog-friendly town, like smaller but more frequent dog parks, perhaps in areas adjacent to the bicycle path or to some of the other trails, the creek trails that exist. Part of the argument is that dog owners have choices now. They don't have to be in the plaza. Enforcement is clearly needed, but as Matt says, enforcement, the problem won't go away by changing the rule. It will just kick it down the road to whatever new rule is in its place. So as part of this evening's action, I'd like to recommend that things stay as they are, but that the council also start the process of looking for potential solutions to dog owners' issues away from the plaza.
Yeah, I agree. It's the plaza, given all the activities that occur there, that this is not the best place to accommodate people with dogs. And I came here in 1998, moved to Sonoma, and that's when there were chickens running around on the plaza, and it became an issue of the exposure of the city to liability because the chickens were attacking the children of tourists. And it was my first demonstration at the plaza to save the plaza peckers. And we didn't succeed, but it seems that the same issue is true with the possibility of having dogs. I'm concerned about this exposure of the city to liability from dogs that attack each other, attack people, bite them, injure them. I've talked to several people who had injuries trying to keep their dog from another dog and ended up in the emergency room or their dog in the vet. And then, of course, the EPA, as David knows, thinks feces are also a health hazard and a source of pollution. It's interesting, just yesterday in the Press Democrat was an article that about dogs attacking a police dog, and they said a Marshall Project found across the United States in 10 years from 2010 to 2020 that police dogs, just police dogs, annually bit thousands of people, including children, innocent bystanders, and even their own handlers. And those are police dogs that are presumably highly trained and controlled. So I don't think we should consider a pilot project. I do agree with Richard that we want to accommodate people with dogs and make it a more Sonoma-friendly city for dogs. But I believe that the best avenue for this is the Community Recreation and Parks Task Force that is now exploring new plans and new options. They'll be looking at other cities as benchmarks, and they can have public hearings, which would come through the Commission on Community Services and Environment, I think. And finally, I think that the master plan that the county parks just implemented for Maxwell Park calls for the construction of a dogs off leash dog area. So I think there are new options coming up, and that would be far better than dogs on the plaza and hopefully make dog owners happy. I do think the enforcement costs, if we wanted to, the enforcement, the no dogs on the plaza now, that certainly maybe Measure M money, which is this $120,000 a year coming to the city over the next 10 years, that some of that could be directed towards enforcement issues, not just at the plaza, but perhaps elsewhere on the city's parks and recreation areas.
Kimberly.
Well, I have swayed back and forth on this issue, primarily because I have the world's sweetest, well-behaved dog, and it would be lovely going into the park with her. And then I made a comment, I guess it was in the paper, about that I go around telling people all the time who have their dogs there illegally that they're going to get a ticket. And so I have been inundated with telephone calls and letters from both dog owners and people opposed to it. So I switched from my opinion of let's have dogs there to, okay, let's do a 3-month or a 6-month time and see how people do. And let's not make a big judgment about bad behavior if we haven't really studied it. But the more that I actually have talked to people, particularly about parents, and in terms of the dogs being pretty attacking around children, it feels to me like a very difficult thing to experiment with for even for 6 months. And we clearly don't have the money right. We don't even enforce right now anybody with their dogs there. So I think it'd be very difficult to come up with. But I must say that I look forward to the public comments to see what someone has to say. But at this point, I feel the same. I'm waiting for some of the other planning entities in the city and the county to come up with bigger plans about how we can encourage dogs, maybe in other places other than our park, because I think it would ultimately be a mess. And I think that if we say, okay, let's try it for 6 months, and it turns out that we couldn't enforce it and there were a lot of accidents, then to change it again, just like Matt said, would lead to a lot of confusion.
Richard?
Should also add that looking at the public record of the comments that were sent to the administration just in the last week have been running about the same percentage against the idea as opposed to in favor of it. Very articulate, thoughtful, looking for compromise in a way that will allow dog owners to have some satisfaction and freedom with the pets and not being punished. With an acknowledgement that the dog owners that are in favor of opening up the plaza are generally the benchmark ones that are good citizens with regard to their dogs, keeping them on the leash, keeping them out of the playground. But they're not there enforcing the dog owners that are not good citizens. And until that can happen, then it's, I think, completely unrealistic to think that anything remotely like good, clean parks would be possible.
Well, I have a few comments I'd like to make. I think the lack of enforcement rationale of the dogs kind of leads to other enforcement rationales, like allowing dogs and mountain bikes on the Sonoma Overlook Trail and Montini trails, or allowing bikes to ride in the plaza, skateboards, or allowing smoking and baking in city parks. If there's not enforcement, then do you just start to allow stuff that you can't enforce? I think that if the rationale of the enforcement is compelling, then it should logically apply to a lot of other things as well. And a trial amnesty period given to all those things. So I think that kind of shows that, you know, maybe the enforcement rationale is not the strongest one. And then also for a trial period to waive the rule of the city permits needed for people to have more than 3 cats or 3 dogs, because it's too hard to enforce. Also, I had thought that the special events policy, if there was a trial period, how that would go into special events policy to accommodate the rules there about dogs. And I agree with my fellow commissioners' comments about how hard it would be to unwind this later. And I'm concerned that it would be kind of a Trojan horse to come in and then would be like a bigger fight to undo it later. I think the rule is there for a reason, and it's there for the reason of failure to control animals, dog waste, for other animals on the plaza like ducks, for kids, and so I think that's the reason why the rule is there. Same time, the city has a large population of people who are have dogs who feel slighted and who fought hard to get dogs to go onto the Montini Trail, and that did not work out. And so I think that a call for proportional representation for these folks is reasonable, and that these guys get their day in the sun, and that ways be sought to find a dog park in a central location with an open run. I think that the costs would be higher than the benefits on the plaza. But I wonder in the city that if the city can't find any central location for a homeless area, that it would just be the height of first world folly to find a place for dogs when you couldn't find a place for people in the central part of the city. So I would ask for the council to consider, as they're doing their deliberations on this, is it a compatible use or not? If it's a trial period, would there be put in the ability to rescind it at any time if there became too many egregious events? And I think there's the potential to have even worse enforcement issues after a trial period. So I think there's much as I would like to feel like I would want to have dog owners have a place where they could go in a central location. I don't think that the plaza is the place. Now, since Sonoma is becoming more elderly as time goes by demographically, it could be that with less kids, that maybe a baseball field could be given over to a dog park at some point. Let's see. So these are some of my thoughts and concerns that I'd like the city council to hear. And I think that's it for now. And I did read all the public comments. I read all the Facebook comments. I know Rob Edwards really well, and I really like him. and I like his dogs. I like Kimberly's dog. I like dogs a lot, and they're really dear companions, and they're sweet, and you know, I think something should be able to be worked out. So I would second all of my colleagues' comments that some other solution be found. And that same thing was said after Monsoon, and that was how many years ago now? So I think that the city should double down and try to find a place where that's substantially larger than the dog park over by the police station. And not seeing any more commissioner comments, I'd like to bring it out to public comments.
Thank you, Chair Alabak. We do have a member of the public that would like to speak. Charles Estudillo, go ahead. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
You hit unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate what I'm hearing from the commission. You know, I raised 2 kids here in Sonoma, 3 grandchildren. We've taken the kids to the park. They've been able to run free. And it's just so joyful to see the kids being able to run in the park without possibility of running into dogs or having dogs, you know, involved in the mix. You can't keep the dog, you have to keep the kids in the playground, whereas now they have the whole run of the plaza. I think, you know, it seems to me that if you allow dogs, you're going to favor dogs over families, over children. People bring their dogs. I see them in restaurants. I see them walking all around. I see dog fights sometimes on the sidewalks. I agree with what I'm hearing commissioners say about causing more problems by allowing dogs in the plaza. There is a dog park not too far away. Maybe we should, up by the police department, perhaps we could, you know, have signs that tell people that there is a dog park where people can take their dogs and have them run off leash. And I'm just concerned about just the serenity of the plaza being disrupted by all these dogs. And I'm a dog lover. My dog's right here with me now, but I would never want to take him to the park. I think that's an intrusion on just what a beautiful place our plaza is. So thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Charles.
So next we have Armando Zimmerman. You can go ahead and speak.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I live on West Spain Street. My name is Armando Zimmerman, and I'm glad to hear a lot of the comments that I've heard already. I would say a couple of things. One is the plaza now has definite boundaries. And given those definite boundaries, I go back to the comments that were made about enforcement. If we haven't been able to enforce the current ban with definite boundaries, how are we going to enforce all these particular rules within the plaza where there are no real boundaries to separate kids' playing areas? How will we develop a model if a trial period were to be taken into real consideration? You really have to set up the model. It's a real life model. You would have to have signage. You would have to have dog poop bins. You would have to have all of the places, you know, that would point people to where the dog, what do they call, the litter bags, et cetera. You would also have to set up, make sure that those dog bags full of poop weren't getting mixed in with the recycling and so forth. Because right now, during large events in particular, it's crazy to even enforce what we try to do regarding current pickup of the plaza and observing the recycling rules and so forth and so on. And I think right now basically it just would be something that I think would not work very well. We have a grand dog that comes to visit. We never take him to the plaza. I would also say that dogs, in my anecdotal experience, can go almost anywhere in Sonoma. Many restaurants allow people to bring their dogs. They can go on any street and so forth. But as somebody pointed out earlier, in front of my house, that doesn't mean the fact that the dog is on a leash doesn't mean that dog owners, in some cases, allow dogs to poop in front of my house, on the newspaper, etc. So my saying for tonight is, it's really not the dogs, it's the owners that are not responsible. And I don't know what percentage of those are, but it doesn't take a lot of people that don't take this seriously to make it unpleasant. And I think it would be unpleasant for our plaza. So I thank you for listening to my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Armando.
Carol Alback, no one else has their hand raised at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wendy, I think Patricia.
Yep, I see that now.
Okay.
Patricia Cullinan, you may speak. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I wrote a very late letter. Thank you if you read it. And if you didn't, please do. I don't support dogs on the plaza, but I do think that the signage could improve to suggest better. There are no horses on the plaza anymore. And when I was a kid many years ago, we all rode our horses up to the plaza and parked them in the parking places. Those days are gone, but the dogs are still here. Hopefully better signage will help people understand that there are no dogs in the plaza. Thank you for all your comments. I like the way this discussion is going.
Carol Alback, I don't see anyone else raising their hand. Thank you.
We also have one written comment that was received, and it's from Maureen Henry from Sonoma. And simply it says, quote, please take into consideration those of us residents of Sonoma who want to enjoy the plaza without the presence of dogs, end quote.
Well, City Manager Toy, where does that leave us?
Okay, so it seems like the consensus is don't change, don't further discuss the policy, consider better signage, consider better enforcement, and consider creating other opportunities for dog owners, but not in the plaza. That's what I have. So if that works for me. And that's all the items on this report. And I very much appreciate the effort and the discussion with CSEC. It's very helpful for staff, and appreciate you putting all that time in to discuss these items, especially the last item.
Nice having you tonight, City Manager Toy. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 4, CSEC members' reports and comments. John?
Yeah, I just have one question. We talked about the zero waste Sonoma and the increasing policy to have residents support their trash and their recyclables and their compost. And I'm just wondering if anybody at Zero Waste has developed an app, because it would be so much easier for people. And this happened to me. I go out and put my glasses on and study the little charts, but there's still a lot of things that aren't on the chart. And I think an app would be really terrific. You just put it on your phone and, right away, it'd be a real helpful for educating and making it more user-friendly for people to embrace this. So do you know if there's any app being developed by Zero Waste for this?
There is none. One of the challenges is the city of Sonoma has different rules or what materials are accepted than the rest of the county because it has two different operations. The best thing that we do have, and it's something that we're going to look at adding to our website, is a searchable database that is connected to Napa Recycles, which is where we bring our materials. But we do not have an app at this time. I know there's commercially available apps that are out there. They do cost money, but that certainly is something we can look at and see what the price is for this community if there was sufficient interest.
And when does our contract with Sonoma Garbage give us the opportunity to consider being consistent with the rest of the county?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question.
The question is if we can't recycle through Recology, which everybody else is doing, when can we switch our garbage trash contract to Recology?
Well, I don't know the exact period of performance of the contract. That's something I would have to get to you, but I don't know. I would just guess, but it's years down the road because it was a 10-year contract, but I don't know when it actually expires.
Okay, thank you, Travis.
8 years left.
But that's something I can have an answer for the next meeting.
Any other commissioner reports or comments? We'll move to agenda item 5, staff comments and announcements.
There is no update from the special events manager. The only update, then we'll skip right to 5.2, if that's okay. The only comment I have from the sustainability coordinator, this is something I shared earlier with the Climate Action Committee, Subcommittee, and I've got additional information, and that is the 2 EV charging stations on East Napa Street behind the Sebastiani Theater, which have been broken for some time. A lease was signed, and we've been notified that the shipping date is on the 14th. We don't have the installation date, but it's going to be shipped on the 2 chargers going to be shipped on the 14th. So then we'll schedule replacement with the company. And this is the decision was to go with a lease instead of a purchase. And the reason why is because technology increases fairly rapidly. So we didn't want to be stuck with outdated equipment. And the lease was pretty cost competitive with a purchase. But at the end of the period, we can update with new technology at the end of the period. I think it's a 4 or 5 year lease. I'd have to look. So that's the only update that I have.
Matt?
Can I just ask one question? I was just by the community center on my bicycle today. In those Tesla charging stations, we've commented this before, that a comment was made. So there's like 6 Tesla charging stations and 2 Tesla stations that will accommodate non-Tesla EVs. And but nobody's going to know that because they just have the sign that says, I think David, correct me, it just says J1772. And I didn't even.
Worse than that, it says Tesla J1772. I suspect all 10 maybe were financed by Tesla. I have not researched that. But as you know, I've raised it. It's 8 and 2, not even 6 and 2. The 2 do work well. I have actually used them to my satisfaction. But the signage for anybody who's not a Tesla owner of sufficient means, they would have no idea that those are. You got to be an expert to know J1772 means pull my Chevy Bolt in here.
Yeah, I've owned a electric vehicle for 2 years, and I didn't even realize until David said it that it's a J1772. What J17? Why did I just say
Well,
On Tesla, we need a big sign saying
Yeah.
electric vehicle charging, Tesla not required.
If it's,
Excuse me, we
this
have
is
to be very
Travis's
careful.
update.
Sorry, we have
Oh,
to
sorry.
be very, we have to be very careful. We cannot discuss anything at this point because that would be a violation of the Brown Act.
You're right.
You can ask a technical question, but if this is something of interest, it can be agendized for a future meeting.
a technical question would involve, would it be acceptable for me to talk to the head of the community center about these two placards and what it would take to modify them? Who controls the wording and color, red and white, on those placards?
That's between Tesla and the community center. The city does not.
Correct.
We-
But is
we
there
could
any
talk to Charlotte.
preclusion for, I could talk to Charlotte about it.
Yeah, you can or we can.
Yeah, or we both can, Garrett.
Okay.
It's a really good thing, and the visitor bureau ought to be able to tell people, their charger's 2-3 blocks away, or right off of Napa Street or Napa Road, whichever Napa it is, at the community center on the backside.
Well, let's keep in mind that this is the sustainability coordinator update, and I think Travis, I heard your guys' feedback here. Travis, do you have more update? Does any other staff have reports or updates? Well, hearing none, it's an honor to serve with you all, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. The meeting's adjourned.
Adios.
Okay, go have dinner, everyone.
Yeah, go walk
Thanks
your dog.
Thanks
Go
for
say hello to
the
Bodie for me.
Okay.
Thank you.